Welcome everybody to this session on um, youth perspectives on the energy transition in Latin America. And before we get started, I just wanted to give a quick introduction to who we are, Student Energy, and a little bit more about our work and how this all really came to be. So if everyone can see my screen properly with this, the slide deck, Student Energy is essentially a global organization that works to build the next generation of energy leaders. And we currently work with a network of over 50,000 youth from 120 different countries who are leading the energy transition towards a sustainable and equitable energy future. So to support this work, we actually collaborate with a lot of different governments, organization, companies, and other entities to facilitate meaningful youth engagement and to mobilize resources to support these youth-led energy solutions. So the way that Student Energy actually started is that it came from an idea between three young people in Canada that felt like there weren't enough opportunities and spaces for young people to have a say in their energy futures. And this is what led to the very first ever International Student Energy Summit, which brought together young people with industry leaders in the energy sector, government officials that began this organization and started this movement where people were able to build out more programs and opportunities, and we were inspired by the passion and ambition of young people to lead these solutions. So since then, we've actually grown out our programming a lot over the last 10 years and have also been able to reach young people from every corner of the globe. And some of these programs include things like our chapters program and our leaders and greenpreneurs programs where young people are able to start community projects in their own regions, the International Student Energy Summit that I mentioned. And this number is actually, it should be 7 now because we just had our virtual Student Energy Summit for the first time. So, and a couple of other chapters that have been onboarded. And so this map just shows a quick overview of where all of our youth are located and where we've been seeing some engagement from youth in our network. So since then, we've actually increased our full-time staff to over 28 full-time staff, increased our organizational budget by 10 times since 2015. And we also have a lot of different funders who support our work, including the government of Denmark, Indigenous Clean Energy, XPRIZE, and Sustainable Energy for All. And all of this work is basically led by our theory of change model, which essentially uses backwards mapping to figure out what our organization's end goal for all of our work should be, which is a sustainable energy future, and then outlines what conditions need to be created in order for young people and our organization to be able to achieve this end goal. So we mainly do that through two approaches, and that's creating space for young people to act, helping people to understand the value that young people bring, and also on the other side is creating change agents. So empowering young people, uniting young people, and helping them to build the skills that are necessary to be able to create that change that they want to see. So this leads us into what this event is all about, and that's the Global Youth Energy Outlook. And the reason why Student Energy decided to start this research project was because oftentimes when we talked to energy leaders, we found that they would reference a lot of these different sets of data and research, different global energy outlooks, but there wasn't necessarily a piece of research or data set that we found that is specifically about youth perspectives on the energy transition. So we thought this would be really interesting for us to tap into and to figure out what exactly do youth want, and provides us with proof when we talk to different actors in the sector of exactly what young people want out of the energy transition. So it's the first project of its kind. And since the start of the project last year, we've been able to engage over 40,000 young people ages 18 to 30 from 180 countries and territories to share their perspectives on that energy transition. So overall, it can be described as a very powerful data-backed advocacy tool for youth advocates and decision makers. And it unites these voices from all these different countries. And of course, this project would not have been possible without the work of our 12 regional coordinators from around the world who represent these different regions that we wanted to engage with and helps to bring this project alive. So it really helps to answer two specific questions this project was focused on, which was what actions do young people want to see happen to deliver a sustainable energy by 2030? And then the second question, how do young people want to be a part of energy solutions needed for this transition? And a lot of this research was it was recently shared with the rest of COP26 at our launch event a couple days ago, but we're excited to be able to talk more in depth about what insights we found from Latin America and specifically. And then this map just outlines each of the 10 different regions that we wanted to engage with throughout the Global Youth Energy Outlook, but obviously this session is going to be focusing on Latin America and the Caribbean. So from here, I will now pass it on to Paula, who is actually our regional coordinator for Latin America and did a lot of this outreach work in the region to find out what youth perspectives were on the energy transition. And she'll share a little bit about the global findings and more specifically about the regional findings as well.
Okay, so thank you. I remember that I talked in the first times with Axel and with Andres, like helping me to reach out to 5,000 young people in Latin America. And thanks God and thanks to the support of many young people and student energy, also we achieved the goal. We had more than 5,000 responses just in Latin America, and this is a great challenge that was faced for everyone. So we were really happy. But what I would like to share about the Global Youth Energy Outlook is that was an incredible experience, not only for me, but for all the regional coordinators, the country ambassadors that were part of it. And also this presentation that we are going to have and the presentation that we already had at COP26 is not only the end point of the Global Youth Energy Outlook, it's just the starting point, because since here another kind of homework and challenges came for everyone. And next, please. So the most important facts of the Global Youth Energy Outlook are first, that most young people are really aware of the role that energy transition plays in the reduction of CO2 emissions. And second, that young people are incredible and powerful, not only activists, but partners that could help to build more impactful initiatives for climate action, giving the space for an intergenerational collaboration between governments, academia, organizations, and young people. In this sense, the global stats of the YTO reveal that 72% of youth surveyed are very or moderately concerned about the pollution and emission caused by the current energy system. So the problem is really clear for everyone, the emissions produced by the energy. Also that 50% of youth surveyed believe that their government needs to invest more in fighting climate change. So in this, we can see that young people really identify the most powerful stakeholder that could lead systematic change in the investment in the fight for climate action. 81% of youth surveyed believe their country or territory should have a decarbonization target for its energy system. From this youth, most of them shares that they want a decarbonization target by 2030. And this is quite radical because we are not asking, or people survey, they are not asking for 2050, 2060, or 2040. They are asking for targets immediately in 2030. So these are critical targets in critical times. Next, please. Okay. In the global stats, also we ask, how do you want to fund the transition? And 56% of youth respondents, they want to tax the production of emissions. Companies that produce emissions pay this tax. So it means that they really understand that the ones that are going to fund the transition are through the taxation maybe or of CO2 emissions, and this could lead to a kind of carbon markets and things like that. Also, could you vote for a candidate based on their position on energy? We asked that, and 83% of the respondents said yes. Next, please. In general, at global, we could say that the key messages are that first, young people identify government policy and willpower as the key factors in the energy transition. So governments have the resources and the power to make policies, projects, and everything needed to make energy transition happen. And it's not only their responsibility or homework, but they have a crucial role on it. Second, that young people see a path forward. They are hopeful about opportunities to participate in the transition. So young people need to feel their perspectives and ideas are really viable, are really valued, but mostly they are heard and converted into action. So we want spaces, but we don't want only spaces where we could share ideas, but we want their ideas coming to actions in real life, you know. And thirdly, that young people believe industry plays a huge role in funding the transition. Since the youth vision, industry needs to be responsible for its emissions and take the leadership in the energy system transformation. Next. We're gonna share some of the insights specifically for Latin America and the Caribbean. And we will see what young people think. Okay. First, when we ask youths across regions what they saw as the biggest barrier to sustainable energy transition, 8 out of 10 regions listed government willpower, policies, and regulations as the biggest barrier to a sustainable energy transition. And in particular, I would say personally that I was really impressed that over 50% of youth in Latin America and the Caribbean voted this option. So it is clear that the political and social situation of our region has a big impact in the energy transitions since the point of view of young people. And interestingly, instead of government willpower, policies, and regulations, youths in Africa and East Asia regions voted current energy industries and available technology as their biggest barrier to sustainable energy transitions, respectively. And in Africa, funding and testing of renewable energy system is a main contributor to its barrier. Next, please. Another question we asked youths was to identify what priority action a business and industries should take for climate change action. And it was found that all the regions choose lobbying government on decarbonization as their top priority action. And most regions choose creating policies to reduce company emissions as their second priority, while committing to becoming carbon neutral or negative as their third priority. So these are, I personally would say that lobbying government on decarbonization was also the first priority in the region, in our region, Latin America and the Caribbean. Next, please. Another key statistics to point out is the responses for youth vision on future government investment in climate change action. Whilst youth across all the regions says we need to invest more as their top response, the second most common response were divided between those who were satisfied with current investments versus those who say that we have not invested at all. Latin American, the Caribbean, and CA Asian youths were the two regions that say that no investment was made at all, highlighting the urgent need for greater action in those regions. Government investment in these regions are slower or weaker in comparison to the other regions, potentially due to the widespread perceptions that renewable energy is more expensive, and they also face challenges in expanding power generation to meet population growth, as well as providing electricity, reliability, and accessibility, but mostly because governments have no clear agendas in how funding the climate change action. So this is a call to governments for transparency and clear roadmaps about the investment in climate change actions worldwide, but more focused in Latin America, the Caribbean, and Asian, in the CA and Asian region. Next, please. Also, here, the government, we asked like, who has the responsibility, who is more responsible to reduce emissions? And here also it's highlighted that the government's role in climate action is really highlighted. As shown in the figure on the slide, youth across all the regions identify governments as the most responsible. This was followed by business and industry and other organizations. So here again, we see that young people really identify the key role that governments have worldwide in policy action, in willpower, in energy transition, and also in the reduction of CO2 emissions. Next, please. Also, when we ask youth in methods funding the transition to net zero, the most commonly response identified across all regions was to tax the production of emissions. Companies that produce emissions need to pay this tax. Interestingly, in Latin America and the Caribbean, over 55% of youths agree in this answer also. And as you can see in the slide, the value of 50% approximately in taxing the production of emissions is commonly shared in the youth responses among all the 10 regions. Next. So to meet its energy needs, each country uses the types of energy available to it in different proportions. This is what we call the energy mix. So at least we that here in this, we are in this space, we know that this is called the energy mix. And as you may know and see in the graph that is from 2018, the majority of the global energy mix is led by fossil fuels like oil, coal, and natural gas. And I would like you to remember the percentage of renewable energy in this mix. You can see that fairly is 2% of the total. Next. We did a question to young people, how you imagine the energy mix in your region by 2030. And here you can see the results of the percentage of renewables that youths think is needed by 2030 to achieve energy transition. And of course, the values of renewable energy in the mix from each region varies a lot or somehow, with the smallest percentage in Middle East and West Asia with 14.6% of renewables, and the biggest percentage in Latin America with 31.2%. So imagine on average, young people globally want the energy mix with at least 20% of renewable energy. Remember, I told you to keep in mind the last 2% of the last slide. So it means that we need to go from the 2% to the 20% by 2030. So it is 10 times of efforts in policies to promote renewables, 10 times of investments for financing the transition. In general, it means that we need to do 10 times what we do now to achieve the energy future that young people dream of. Next. So in Latin America and the Caribbean, also we asked, like, do you think your country or territory should have a decarbonization target? And almost everyone, like 92% of young people say yes. And if yes, when? So 60% of young people say they want decarbonization targets in their territories by 2030. And also in the global statistics, we could say like 81% say yes and 62% say by 2030. I could say that the urgency that we compare here, the 92% and the 81% in the decarbonization target percentage, I could say that it is because the global south suffer mostly the effects of climate change. So it means that we need harder actions, we need most commitments, we need more efforts to tackle the climate change, the climate change effects in rural communities and everywhere. So that I could say that that is the why we're more radical about when we have, what we have, and when. So that's why, and these are like the findings in the region. And I would say that it was an incredible experience also because we were sharing this kind of data with many young people, and now we are gonna discuss later what comes next, what we need to do with all this data. We don't want just the Global Youth Energy to be a report, export as a PDF, and go to the library, digital library that the Student Energy has or any organization worldwide. It's how we convert all these data into actions by young people, but and in all stakeholders. So now I will pass again to Megan. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Paula. I think that gives us a lot of context into what we'll be talking about now, which is just discussing these findings a little bit more in depth and really unpacking some of the data points that we saw here. So I'll open this up to all of you now to talk a little bit about what Paula discussed. And the first question that I have for all of you is, based on the insights of the Global Youth Energy Outlook that we just, that Paula just shared during the session, what were some points that really stood out to you, and what were your initial thoughts on it? And before you answer, please introduce yourself so that everyone knows a little bit more about what you have to, like, a little bit more about your work and what your thoughts are on this. So feel free to jump in, whoever wants to go first.
I could go.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, hi everyone. First, thank you. This was an incredible presentation. So my name is Eduarda Zogby. I'm from Brazil, and I'm currently doing my master in public administration at Columbia University, focused on energy policy. I think that one of the things that stood out for me that I'm very happy that was, embedded in the main report is the fact that a majority of young people, and I think it was around 80%, believe in taxing fossil fuels. And I just wanted to share the perspective of Brazil, because I think this is a huge challenge and it's very political, as Paula was also talking about the importance of policy making in this process. We in 2019, Brazil offered 99 billion reais in fossil fuel subsidies, which would be the equivalent of around $20 billion in fossil fuel subsidies, which is very scary considering that we're thinking about an energy transition here. And this definitely does not represent what the youth want for our future or the population, especially because this year we approved the provisional measure in Congress that also ended the subsidies to renewable energy, because now they believe that renewable energy is technologically viable, and costs were reduced to a point that we don't no longer need subsidies. And it always brings to the question, why are we still providing these subsidies to fossil fuels then? And I think that there's a huge responsibility for national oil companies to make the transition, and for young people, not only in our region, but young people everywhere, to acknowledge that the problem is not only the international oil companies that we know about. Sometimes, and in most countries, in mine, for example, changing the business model of a company like Petrobras, one of the largest producers in the world, is extremely hard, especially because since it belongs to the government, it's a political matter of who's appointed to that position. And then you have a change in administration, there's a new person. So sometimes you'll have a prioritization of one topic over another. And I think that that's a huge challenge that hopefully some of us will end up working in these organizations in our future. And I'm still hopeful that I am not necessarily going to work there, but I believe that we need young people working there to change it from within.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks so much for providing your insight on what the environment and the space is like in Brazil.
Well, I'll take, you hear me well, right?
Yep, we can hear you.
Connection was a little bit, well, again, thank you for all the presentation. It was really incredible and so inspiring to see you leading this this whole project, young people. And well, the comment of Eduarda, I totally following that. I feel the same way in Argentina, taking it to my country. We subsidize a lot of energy, especially, well, fossil fuels. We subsidize projects of fossil fuels, and it's just the opposite of what young people are asking, right? And in that sense, I wanted to highlight the idea that governments, the importance of governments leading this transition, not only technologically, but also in helping to change the culture and everything that the roles, how we consume energy. And that needs a lot of capacity building and education that has to be promoted, information that has to be promoted in the education system, that governments have the power to inform and to spread this. And this change, this cultural change, is coming from within, from us, from the bottom up. And the government should embrace it, should enhance it, and should take it as an opportunity. We young people, we are motivating this change, and they should get it and get in the wave with us. We are not, in that sense, I wanted to highlight the idea that we are in the change and we want to push it with the government. We want to work in the policies. We want to make things happen. We all this project, and hearing Eduarda, it comes to my mind the idea that we're not just criticizing and asking change. We're actually saying what can be done. We're saying this policy in particular is not okay. We should go this way. So it's really inspiring seeing such, well, in this case also, well, women, like young women and also men, saying particularly what we can do. And that's it. It's really great to see Latin America positioning, having a specific positioning about public policy. So it's great. It's great to see that.
Well, can I go first? Thank you. Well, my name is Axel. I'm from Mexico. Something that very impressed, I get very impressed about the outlook was around the decisions. For example, governments have like more than the 50% of the decision on this. So it's something that very works to me, because here in Mexico we're living like different process around what about the energy policy of the country. In Mexico, we have a lot of renewable energy potential, but the federal government insists in invest more on refineries, invest more on heavy oil fields, invest more in like modernize all infrastructure that we have about oil production, and instead of like invest on solar energy, that is one of the most renewable energies that we have to explode here, no? So it's very difficult for young people here in Mexico to explain this type of governments that the decisions that they are doing, it's very it's not in case right now, because we're living on a climate crisis, and this climate crisis, one of the most opportunities that we have to reduce these potential consequences about energy, because energy is producing like 60% or 70% of all the gas emissions in the atmosphere. So if we can stop the energy issues, or we can stop the or the dirty energy production, we can really have an opportunity to go to accomplish this or achieve these goals that we have on energy transition. Because in other ways, it's very difficult for people, like only separate about what the government wants to that energy wants to that you consume in your house. For example, here in my house, I'm consuming every day dirty energy from a thermal electric plant. So what can I do if I want to consume another type of energy? It's impossible here in Mexico, because the regulations and all the policies is focused on consume heavy oil fuel. So it's very difficult for people here. And I think I'm very scared about because the governments have the decision, or more than the 50% of the decisions to what is happening around energy transition in my country. We are very lost, or maybe we can make it, So I think it's a good effort about all the things you do around the Global Youth Energy Outlook. Paola, congratulations for all your effort and all the leadership that you employ in the different people from your countries and organizations that collaborate with you, because I think the first step to contribute on this issue is get informed about what we think, or get informed about what we need or what we want for this energy transition. So it's an honor to be part of this conversation, and very congratulations for you.
Well, thank you. You hear me well? Well, thank you. I think I just teammates says everything, but I want to say in Colombia, I'm Andres Cabanzo, I'm from Colombia, thank you. In Colombia, we have a dystopia, I don't know how to say, but in the same week that our president, Ivan Duque, says at the COP26, like, we are impulsing, we are creating a new climate action law in the whole country, discovered in Colombia a new oil well in the Casanare. It's a typical oil region, and in the same week he said the new discover it's a new impulse for the energy transition. And at this level is the discussion of the energy transition and all these things in Colombia. All the information, all the inputs that the outlook give us as a youth people in Colombia, it's great because it's like a framework that we can move and we can create connections, we can create campaigns and all these things, right? But in the real thing, the government say, hey, thank you for your advice, thank you for your words, but we are working in this bias, right? So more than the subsidies and all these things, I think Colombia and all the youth people need social risk, right? To continue with the oil companies, continue with the carbon, with the gas, right? Because that's 30, it's great, it's magnifical, right? But we can achieve it actual with the actual political that we have. That's the point, right? And I joined to Axel to congratulate to Paola for the leadership and all the things. But I'm skeptical about the target at the 2020 because it's very difficult for real. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. I could say that the target. And now, speaking about what is happening in Latin America, I am from Bolivia. So we are living a really, really difficult situation right now. Like, I don't know if you have seen like COP26 is everyone right now in Facebook, everything, but when you see behind the political situation in my country, it's really, really difficult because we have by this side the government was energy transition, but they continue investing in natural gas places, industries, and I I came skeptical because also in COP26, young people were asking for these negotiation spaces for young people where they could take the voice and build these negotiation spaces between president and young people. And I know that my country has one, but what I'm really afraid of is also the transparency that these governments will have in how selecting the negotiations, the negotiators. I mean, like most of the time, negotiators are part from fossil fuel industries. And this is something also in COP26. How do we truly engage indigenous or youth indigenous people real as negotiators in these kind of spaces? So which transparency we are giving, how I don't know how real are the negotiation spaces. Sometimes it's really challenging in my country as for the political situation, for the economic situation, and I'm quite afraid also about the investments because like the investment here plays a key role about funding the transition, what the outlook said, and I'm quite afraid how in my country that will become real because my country is really small and we don't have like the economic power as Chile or Brazil to have impactful things. In my case, my country is someone like I know like Paraguay or Ecuador maybe, and our economies has most of the times another challenges that right now we have economic development. That is our priority because of COVID-19. But we as young people here in these kind of countries, we say, how do we surely, as Delfina say, how do we make understand governments that COVID-19 pandemic is a truly opportunity to engage sustainable energy or just in general the transition for climate change into the development or economic development plans that governments have. So, this is a quite interesting thing that came in my mind. And also because of the situation in my country and related to the YGO.
I would like to comment on that. Probably it's difficult to think of how to do that when we are thinking in national level, but we can also think this in other levels of government. For example, a local level in cities, municipalities. There it's easier to think and to engage youth because the impact is more direct and there's a closer relationship to civil society. For example, in Argentina, the city of Mendoza, they needed to do research about the impacts of climate change locally. So they took the opportunity of youth and their knowledge and their specific knowledge and did the thesis of the local universities as an input. They used them as an input for the policy they are taking now. So that is a little example. No, it's really little, but I think that youth can be engaged in a way to have co-benefits in development, in economic growth, in social, and we also have to take into account the fact that local youth not only can bring us this knowledge and like use the time they're using, they're implementing in the thesis study in this example, but they also have specific knowledge. They're an asset in specific ways. For example, with their connections, with their relation to the local ground, is not the same to ask an external consultancy to do an analysis and to someone that lives in there, that experiences, that knows how the things work out. So I think there are enormous potential to embrace youth in this energy transition, and not only like use their time as an asset under specific knowledge. Like sometimes it seems that the objective of involving youth it's separate from development, and not it's everything in the in the same package. It's just look at the co-benefits, plan it carefully, and follow the road you plan. So yeah, a little comment.
Yeah, thank you so much to all of you for sharing like your initial thoughts on some of the data that was presented. I think at least me being not from Latin America, what I gathered from all of your perspectives was just that there you all agree with the young people that provided their perspectives in the outlook, and there's a lot of overlap between all of these different issues that we're seeing in the Latin American region, but then there's also those specific challenges that each country probably faces as well, depending on their local context. And also that importance you just mentioned, Delphina, about engaging with young people, because something that we found in Student Energy's work is that young people are connected to a lot of different groups on the ground. And that's why engaging with young people is so powerful, because they're connected to like their parents, their grandparents, and their siblings and things like that, and all these other different community groups. And so that's what makes young people so interesting in that way. But yeah, it was just really interesting to hear all of your initial thoughts on that. So the second question that I have for all of you is that one of the reasons why we created the Global Youth Energy Outlook at Student Energy was to create more meaningful opportunities for youth to be engaged in the energy transition. So my question now is, based on these results and your own work at the forefront of the energy transition in Latin America and the Caribbean, what do you think could be done to generate stakeholder action, I guess, and how can we use this, how can young people use this data in their work? And then the same thing as the first question, anyone who wants to answer first can go ahead.
Well, Eduardo or me? Eduardo, please.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. Start and then I'll continue.
Okay. Well, the problem, I think, is not the information, right? With this new outlook, we have a lot of information to analyze and to given this data to the all young people, in my case, in Colombia, and the situation is, what is the position of each department here in Colombia, for example? As a political level, Colombia is divided in 32 departments, right? So through the National Energy Board, my organization, we are trying to understand what is the planning for each department in action, right? In energy action in three indicators. The first one is climate action. The second one is energy, and the third one is the involvement of the youth, right? And with that, we identify three kinds of stakeholders, right? The private sector with a different level, like the small company in the south of Bogota, or the big company like Coca-Cola, Falabella, or others companies. The second one is the NGO, like the National Energy Board. And the third one is the universities, schools, and all these things. And that we try to do at this moment to organize the stakeholders with this information is like the beginning is education, like the climate education with Axel Sutton and the big company at the big platform in all Latin America, but just in one school, because we understand that we don't need to cover all Colombia in the same month, right? We start with baby steps, like this month for schools, and the next month other 4 schools, right? And with the private sector, we are trying to create like a fund, right, to um, create a youth investment fund for all the new initiatives, right? Because young people need money to create or to pass the idea or the idea world, right, to the material world. And with this money, we want to organize uh, uh, annually like an event to promote these organizations focused in the climate change, in energy transition, but the private sector understand for each department what is the priorities, and in this form, uh, put the young people in the stage and give money, give information, and give all the capacity that they need to uh, go to the next level at political, at educational, at social, all these kind of aspects. That's what we are doing here in Colombia. I don't know, Eduarda, maybe.
No, yes, I appreciate your comment. And also, I think you talked about more of the public sector, and Delphina also mentioned local action. I was thinking more in term to answer Megan's question, how to mobilize stakeholders. My experience is very much in the international organization realm, and I think that young people, what they can do sometimes is pressure organizations that are usually funders or are very involved in projects in Latin America to start seeing things differently, because I think someone mentioned this before, but also the fact that most of the time we, these organizations hire consultants that are from different countries that are making assessments on Latin America without speaking the language, without reading the laws. They make things seem very different than they actually are. And I think that, and I'll give an example. Until recently, I was working for Sustainable Energy for All, and most of the portfolio, most of the projects were in Africa and in Asia. And I was really pushing to expand it to Latin America, because even though we don't have an electricity gap that is the same in terms of percentage of sub-Saharan Africa, we still have in Colombia, for example, there are 400,000 people without access to electricity. And SDG 7 is about leaving no one behind. So if we want to bridge this access, we cannot ignore that in our countries, 3, 4, 5% of the population don't have access. And this is the people that need it the most, usually indigenous people, usually women, rural communities. So from inside, I was trying to show them and give the numbers, because speaking the language is always easier. And then in the end, we were able to start working with Colombia. I left right when this work started, but it took around 6 months to try to make the case to start expanding to Latin America. And I think this happens in all organizations. Sometimes they have a perceived idea or perceived risk of investing in a certain place, when in reality, for the people that locally work in organizations or enterprises, it's much different. So I think that young people, especially, some of us are starting to study abroad and work in different places and work even in different countries within Latin America. We have, I think, a responsibility of showing what are these gaps and how we can, try to make the energy transition happen. If it doesn't work in the local government or national government, depending on our governments, but make the pressure come externally and work with other young people like Student Energy to make it happen.
I just wanted to add about what Eduarda said. Today I was speaking to a girl, and she was telling me, ask the communities what they need. And that resonated in my head, because that happens a lot. Probably a government sometimes they think solutions, right? And they want to implement the solution they think, but sometimes it's just ask the communities what they need. Sometimes they have the answer, but not the resources. So, well, mobilizing funding, mobilizing stakeholders to get the funding to do things, it's certainly fundamental. But that there's that line that we need the funding, but ask the communities what they need, and do not impose new solutions, because they will probably are in the terrain and they already thought just wanted to do that short intervention.
In my opinion, I think Paola starts with this first step. Like information is it's very important to decide, to create actions, to develop projects, because if you doesn't have this information, how you can plan or how you can like start to do something to resolve this issue. So I think this global youth energy outlook give us this opportunity to get informed and use this information to generate more education. And for example, in my organization, Climate Education, we're working with different countries and different focal points for the different parts of Latin America. And of course, they need to know the result of their national outlook, because if they doesn't know what the community wants or what the community needs for in front face to face this energy transition, it will be very hard for them to like look around and know where are they stepped, no? So where are they step? So in my opinion, we have to use this information. I'm in accord with Eduardo to get pressure or to put pressure into these different organizations, international organizations, foundations that are very interested on this. Because, for example, in my country, it's very difficult to start something like that, because just the government doesn't want to know more about energy, renewable energy, but the people, yes. So social movements and this type of energy movements are very important, and we need to create more. For example, in Argentina, we start a new group that is leading by Manuel Golom, that is a friend of mine, and he starts very well this year, and he are working with different people and asking them and trying to make a movement in there. So they need tools, and this outlook is a very important tool to front this energy transition. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for all your ideas that are really interesting. Like, since Andres thinking locally, to Eduardo thinking regional, also with Delfina sustaining that idea, and Axel giving us the product information. How can we use the information from the Outlook? That is quite interesting for us, and also very, I would say, interesting to go to the next steps for the YGO. And I would say that I personally work with another stakeholder. I am studying industrial engineer, and right now I work in a startup for sustainability in the transportation. So sometimes I could say in the point of a industry that sometimes is the more responsible and for CO2 emissions and things like that, that truly the pressure needs to come from outside, because everything inside the company is like a bubble. Each company has their culture, their objectives, their mission, its vision. Everything is really well structured in these big companies. It's a bubble. If you want something to change inside the bubble, you need to take pressure outside the bubble. And you can have policies, you can have youth movements, and all of that will, I would say, that destroy the bubble, and you will have impactful things for industries. I would say that because industries are a different world. I have worked with the student energy, I have worked in these kind of spaces, even with policymakers, and it's really, really different because companies have their own objectives. They will not maybe matter about, okay, climate change, okay, that's happening, and they have like sustainable plans, but they are not like transparent, they are not like sometimes fair. So they have the bubble. They will not hear until the pressure comes outside. And the YGO could be interesting because we know that they need to take action, and we need to get pressure. We need to pressure not only governments, but also the industries to change. And also we could have our opinions and ideas to pressure governments so they could pressure industries to take responsibilities in CO2 emissions. So that's something also they wanted to share since the point of view of industries. And just to return to you, Megan.
Just a little comment. The fact that we have our own information, that's very important.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I think the information that from here counts as like young people's information and perspectives on the energy transition that will be very useful for that. And I think that kind of ties into um, the last question, and also just to wrap up the session because we're pretty much on time now. We're just going to talk about these calls to actions from young people at this point. And if any of you have your own calls to action that you want to add to this, feel free to add that in, or if you have to leave, that's totally okay too, because I know we're running out of time. But just to quickly speed through it, some initial calls to action and insight that were found from the Global Youth Energy Outlook, very clearly from all of your discussions on this as well, is that governments need to invest more on climate action. And there's an urgent need for climate finance to for pipeline development of young people leading these innovative solutions and technologies. The second part is to set decarbonization targets based on youth priorities to reach those net zero carbon emission that we want to see by 2030, or by Latin American youth want to see by 2030. And also to develop solutions and policies based on region-specific data and for local context, which I think came up a lot in this discussion as well. How you all mentioned the need to talk to communities about what exactly do they want to create locally specific solutions. And then the need for governments to take responsibility as the main actors in developing clear roadmaps to reach net zero. And then the renewable energy as a key source for how strategy for how we're going to get to decarbonize not only Latin America, but also the rest of the world. And then the idea that this transition needs to be fair for everyone, especially taking into account the voices of women, youth, and indigenous communities. And then in terms of what's next for the Global Youth Energy Outlook, we did launch our website actually, and we'll send the link to that on the next slide. But to follow Student Energy's social media to get updates on the work that we're doing and some opportunities to get involved. And then something that I think came up in the conversation as well was just to talk about youth perspectives on the energy transition and reflecting on what youth want to see on these actions, but also following the work of all of our panelists as well, who are already doing amazing work at the forefront of the energy transition. So that pretty much wraps up our conversation. And this is just links to different, to the Global Youth Energy Outlook's website as well. But I wanted to ask if there was any last words that the panelists wanted to offer in terms of your calls to actions or next steps that you think should be taken.
Well, I can start. What I would say is it's really important to our Latin American countries to find their path in terms of timing and technology rechange. There are going to be some inconsistencies and some things that seem not quite okay, like investing in certain energies that are not so carbon neutral. But this has to be done only if it is part of the path to the renewable system, to a renewable matrix. In that sense, it's really important to plan strategically the path that the country has to take. Only like individual actions that are not connected to each other are not enough for the transformation we have to do. It's really important to set the objective and set the steps we have to do to get there. And so to organize action to get to that objective. So planning, plans, national plans, local plans, probably it's not so revolutionized to say, hey, plan. Probably you won't hear that in a social mobilization, but we need that. We need to know that if they're investing in fossil fuels, in a project in fossil fuels, it's part of the equation and it is not taking us to a no rechange. It's normal that there are going to be some inconsistencies, but it has to have to be harmonized for the transition we have to make. Latin America has different timing than the North, that is true, but to have a different timing is not an excuse to delay action. So that's my final thought.
I'm according with a very accord with Delfina. I think for every energy revolution, we need a plan. So the plan is very important to everything we want to do. And I want to express this part in Spanish if I can do it, because I think this is a moment to talk to the audience from Latin America. Y lo que yo les podría decir como a todos los que están como prestando atención a este webinar es que sigan creando capacidades, sigan desarrollando y generando información para ustedes mismos para enfrentar esa crisis climática, para enfrentar esa transición energética, porque si no tenemos esas habilidades, no importa que tengamos el dinero ni la tecnología del mundo, porque las habilidades que nosotros podemos obtener hoy como jóvenes, en las que nos podemos capacitar y en las que podemos como empezar a trabajar desde hoy, son las que nos van a dar las herramientas para el futuro. Hoy en día somos jóvenes, pero tal vez en 10 años seamos líderes de alguna organización o estemos en algún puesto importante, y si no tenemos esas capacidades para estos años que vienen, de verdad va a ser muy difícil. Entonces, entre más capacitados estemos, entre más informados estemos, entre más unidos, más fácil va a ser poder seguir este movimiento y crear mejores condiciones para una transición energética pues más sostenible o duradera, ¿no? Entonces, thank you for the invitation. It was a little comment in Spanish, but I think it is a very good conversation today. Thank you, Paula.
That's not fair. I want to do the same. I want to say a little statement in Spanish, but well.
It's your moment, bro.
Okay.
No, you are forbidden. Axel can do it, you know.
Okay, perfect.
No, come on, do it in Spanish.
Well, I do a little bit in Spanish, other in English. Es importante que para todos entendamos cuál es nuestra posición y que nuestra posición esté entendida en lo que queremos hacer. No todos pueden hacer política pública porque no tienen los medios, no tienen la educación, no todos pueden salir a las calles porque tienen hijos, porque tienen trabajos. Entonces, lo más importante es que ustedes entiendan en dónde están, y entendiendo dónde están, se pregunten a dónde quieren llegar, y en ese momento tracen una ruta hacia allá. No importa si es a través de social media o estar en las calles o, como dice Delfina, haciendo el gran plan, el super gran plan revolucionario, pero es importante eso. Una vez que ustedes definan eso, es muy interesante hacia dónde fluye el barco, porque ya tienes muy claro a dónde vas a llegar. And I think the last statement in English is everything needs a plan, but also needs hands, right? Because the plan is perfect, but we need hands to do it, to become a reality of that. So thank you as well, Axel, Paola, Delfina, Megan, Daniel, all people here, because this kind of conversation create almost curiosity about the topic. And that's the first step of all knowledge that a person can create by herself or herself. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you everyone for joining us today. It was clearly impactful roadmap ideas that you share with us, and also it will help you. It will help me also to get all these ideas, how in building and planning the next steps for the global youth energy outlook, and also working with Megan in this to have our created toolkit and go out into the next level, how the YGO could be more impactful and useful for youth in our region and worldwide, I would say, regionally at least. So I would say something also in Spanish. I love Spanish. Pues bueno, amo mi idioma, entonces, sorry. Aprendan español como por ahí una vez hoy. Algo muy importante es que lo que ustedes han dicho es edúquense, fórmense, actívense, y lo que me gustó de Andrés lo que dijo es actúen desde lo que están haciendo. Podrán ser emprendedores y pueden ser emprendedores climáticos. Si están trabajando en tecnología, pueden hacer startups en clean tech y muchísimas cosas. Pueden hacer advocacy o como digamos, hablar por cambio climático desde lo que están haciendo en su día a día, sea grande o chiquito, es algo que siempre yo he dicho en este tipo de espacios, que realmente vale la pena y es motivar, ¿no?, a los jóvenes. Mira también que está abierto el Global Youth Energy Outlook, cuando ustedes tengan una pregunta, tengan ideas de qué podemos hacer nosotros ahorita con este reporte que está ahí construyéndose, terminándose de construir, cuál va a ser el siguiente nivel, pues bienvenidos. Siempre vamos a estar con las puertas abiertas para ver cómo colaborar y también cómo nosotros logramos que este reporte tenga mayor impacto. Eso es lo que nosotros queremos, no que se quede, como les decía, en un reporte, que se vaya a dormir como PDF o que se quede como en el website de Steering Energy. Como esos, hay reportes millones en el mundo, ¿no? La idea es cómo logramos que el reporte realmente tenga efecto en la gente, empoderando a juventudes y pues moviendo a los stakeholders, ya sean gobiernos, industrias, logrando pues como dirían ustedes, cosas de la vida real. Entonces, eso sería, ¿no? Muchísimas gracias otra vez por esa fuerza latina que está acá y also thanks to Megan for leading this event and inviting us and organizing all this stuff. That was really incredible.
Thank you so much, everybody. And I think that was really important to have like the messages in Spanish. And I wish I could speak so that I could facilitate it in Spanish too. But thank you so much, everybody.
I would say that I
Thank
love
you.
my Spanish. Thank you.
Thank you very much. See you soon, energy leaders.
Thank you.
See you
Thank you.
soon.
We are part of the movement. Bye bye.
We're part of the movement. Oh yeah.